And welcome everybody. It is Wednesday. That means it's time for the Kubernetes Office Hours, the show where we live stream on the internet and try to answer as many of your Kubernetes questions as quickly and as thoroughly as possible. My name is George Castro. Special edition here today. Normally we go on the third Wednesday of every month, but a bunch of us were traveling, so we are going today on the 28th. Thank you to those of you joining us. We're going to do quick intros and then kind of let you know how this gets started. So let's go in order. Pavislav, you go first, and Puya, then Joel, then Chris. How about that?
Hi, I'm Pavelas. I'm a software engineer. I work a lot with Kubernetes, both as a user and as an administrator. I'm also a maintainer of Project Thanos, which is a CNCF project for Prometheus. So yeah, that's me.
Hi, I'm Puya. I'm doing developer relations and product at GiantSwarm, and I have mainly experience with running Kubernetes in all kinds of platforms, Azure, AWS, and on-premise, as well as some security and authentication stuff.
Hi, I'm Joel. I work for Pusher out of London. I have recently been working on CI, so we're currently implementing Prow here, which is the Kubernetes CI if you haven't heard of it. I've done a lot of stuff with controllers in the past, so if you've got any controller questions, controller runtime, kube builder sort of stuff, send them my way. Also done security and that kind of stuff in the past as well.
I'm Chris Carty. I'm a senior developer with the City of Ottawa's DevOps team. My current focus has been on getting Flux and GitOps working on-prem. So most of my experience has been as a user and admin of kube clusters on-prem.
And I'm George Castro. I'm a community manager for Kubernetes at VMware, and I'm kind of the MC organizer of this little shindig here. All right, so here's how it works. Welcome, everybody. We're glad you've joined us here today. We are live streaming on YouTube. How's the audio sound? Feel free to type into the Slack channel where you're from, say hello, that kind of thing. We like to see things scrolling in the channel. It motivates us to put on a great show for you. Before we start here, the ground rules. Judgment-free zone. Everyone had to start from somewhere. There are no dumb questions, so feel free to ask whatever question is that you're stuck on right now, and we will do our best to help you out. And while we will do our best to answer your questions, we don't have access to your cluster. So live debugging is kind of off topic. We're not going to be able to like SSH into your thing and figure out where your control plane is broken or whatever. But we will do our best, however, to at least let you know where to look to at least get you moving in a place if you're stuck. So please be cognizant of that. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on your answers with your experiences and pro tips. We definitely want to spread from information from people who are running Kubernetes in production. Audience, you can help us out by pasting URLs to official documentation, blogs, projects. At some point, someone's going to ask, hey, what tool do I use for this? Feel free to just whack all those URLs into Slack. We do stream the Slack channel here it is on the side during the broadcast. And what I do is at the end, I grab all the URLs and publish them in the YouTube description as a sort of show notes. So if you see us mention something and you can't quite remember the name or whatever, we'll always publish the URLs at the end. So feel free to post your questions in this channel. And if not, we have a thread on Discuss Kubernetes, which I will post here in a minute. Now that I don't have Bob, I don't have anyone to post here. If you have a long form question that you want to toss into this thread here, or give us a link to a Stack Overflow question or something that you might be stuck on, we'd be happy to look at those. You can also help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, paying it forward, stuff like that. So with that, we are about to get started. Before we get started, just a quick thanks out to GiantSwarm, StockX, Packet, Pusher.com, Weaveworks, VMware, Lyft, the University of Michigan, Utility Warehouse, and the City of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, for donating their engineering time to have these fine folks here help everyone out. And of course, a special thanks to the CNCF for sponsoring the t-shirt giveaway. So if we ask your question on the air, we give away 2 t-shirts at the end of the show. So ask your questions, stick around, we'll do a little raffle. It's guaranteed to be random, not really. And we will give out as many Kubernetes t-shirts as we can, because we only have 3 more of these before KubeCon. So with that, panel, how are we doing? How do we sound out there, audience? Feel free to start typing in your questions. Ooh, looks like Miguel's discovered Prow, so we're going to talk about that in a little bit. All right, we're going to start out with the question queue. Audience, feel free to just keep slapping the questions in the channel, and we'll go. All right, y'all ready? Give me thumbs up, all that good stuff. All right, Alice asks, hi folks, curious if anyone has seen a tool that can make recommendations for limits on pod resource limits based on running history. I know about the vertical pod scaler, but as I understand it, does not play well with the cluster autoscaler, which is what we use. Thanks in advance. Any tips here?
So you can use the vertical pod autoscaler in a like recommendation mode rather than actually doing anything, which is probably what I would suggest you do. So there's like, I think 3 ways you can use the VPA. You can either have it say, just like log what it would recommend for the requests and for CPU and memory, in which case you can then read those and kind of use those as your recommendations, or you can have it start actually like intercepting when new pods are created, or just actually start killing pods and like changing the requests and limits sort of on the fly. I think it's those latter 2 where it won't play very well with the horizontal autoscaler, but that first one, there shouldn't be any problems. So give that a try and see what it recommends.
We use VPA together with cluster autoscaler and haven't run into big issues, but we also only use it on like 1 or 2 pods only. So I would try that out. Also be careful. I think what vertical pod autoscaler is doing is setting requests and not limits. When you set limits, be careful. Just in general, CPU limits might not be what you think them to be. There is a very good article and threads about it by Henning from Zalando. I'll find those out in a bit. TLDR, usually CPU limits don't make sense. Don't do them. We, for a lot of things, actually even remove limits on memory on things like an Nginx, for example, because they have a strange way of reloading, for example, where they double the memory for a very short time. And then you might just want to have alerting on extended use of resources instead of something that OOMs your pods. It depends a bit on the priority of the containers. And maybe, I mean, a lot of people just use Prometheus and other monitoring tools to just check out maybe a week or a month of usage and see what kind of a baseline would be.
I have a follow-up question for both of you. Since you, any special considerations for like things like Java that might get killed? So I know in older versions of the JVM that was like an issue, but I know that in newer versions or whatever, they're becoming more container friendly. Anyone have any insights on things like that? Because I know we've had questions in the past about, you know, why does my stuff always getting killed?
Yeah, I remember, I think anything below Java 10 or Java 9 was not very easy to behave inside a container and would not, like even if you give it limits, it would just not adhere to them. I think 10 has fixed that and 11 even more, but there's workarounds. I think Red Hat and some others had very good blog posts about how to work around that.
Okay. MS Heine asks, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say on the sort of memory and stuff sort of front, actually Pia and I were at a meetup last week in London, and there was a mention there that Go 112 isn't playing very well with the vertical pod autoscaler. And there's like a debug flag that you can turn off to give it the old sort of memory behavior again. I will try and find what that was and post it. But yeah, if you're using the VPA with Go 112, apparently it can cause issues.
Good to know. I see several people typing in the channel. Feel free to let us know your experience in whatever topic we're discussing, and keep the questions coming. We're queuing them up. All right, anything else on pod resource limits? Okay, moving on. MS Heine asks, how do I use -- as successfully to reference a service account in another namespace than what I'm testing against? Context, I'm trying to make a Kate service account and trying to scope what permissions it has access to using auth. Can I, ooh, wait, I think I mispasted. I think I have the syntax of doing something like kubectl auth -- as equals CICD user. can I get services dash namespace equals my namespace? But that CI/CD user is in a different namespace. I feel like it's not getting picked up by my syntax.
So I believe you have to use the same sort of reference format that there is for RBAC role bindings when you're doing service counts. So service counts, while they have a name, when they're referred to in sort of permissions, they're normally system : service count : then the namespace, then a colon, and then the namespace, the service count name. So I think that's probably what you need to do there, though I haven't tested that.
Any other comments on this one? Miguel says, today I learned about Prowl. Where can I find more info here? This one's probably you, Joel.
Yeah, okay, so Prowl is a bit of a beast. There's a lot of stuff to it, and it's made of lots of different individual controllers. So the best way to just get started is read through the docs, I think. There's also a bunch of talks linked on the READMEs, so maybe check out a couple of those. I watched one while I was in Seattle. I think it's linked, but I can't remember what the title was. Mm-hmm. I would also recommend checking out some of the repositories. So I'll link ours as well. But a bunch of the, so on the README on Prowl, there's a section that's like who uses us. A few people on there have actually linked their configuration, which if you're going to start using Prowl is like gold dust. So I spent most of like our sort of getting started period looking at JetStack's repo and seeing what was going on there, how they're configuring it.
Yeah. So Prowl is the thing that merges my stuff into Kubernetes, right? Is that the bot?
Yeah, that's one part of it. So when you've got, I don't know if you ever open a PR to Kubernetes, you'll get this little bot saying, hey, I need someone to approve running the test. That's part of Prowl. Okay. Then there's the /looksgoodtome /approve. That's also part of Prowl. They've got this thing that does the labels for you. They've then got something called Tide, which watches these labels. And then there's like automation configuration for how many approvals do I need? How many like reviewers do I need before I can get merged? That's all part of Tide. There's something called Trigger that starts running tests. So you have these concepts of pre-submits and post-submits and periodic jobs. Pre-submits run on PRs, post-submits run on pushes to branches. So they're typically used when you merge into like master on your repo or something like that. There's, as I say, there's a whole load to it. Sure. I could probably talk about it for an hour or two.
I know lots of people. So I know the Red Hatters use it for OpenShift. You're using it. You said JetStack's using it. So that might be cool.
I think also like number of open source projects use it as also for building stuff and
Istio are using it, for instance, which when you run a fork, it is incredibly handy if you can just like copy and paste their config. Get your own CI.
Excellent.
Yeah, also I know that I think like Jenkins X by default also installs Prowl, and we have like some docs around it. So yeah, I'll post the link.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we actually started looking at this. So when I was in Seattle for KubeCon last year, I was doing the research for this project to move over to Prowl, and I sort of was talking to lots of different companies about what their CI systems look like, and then had a demo from Jenkins X guys. I was just like, I recognize a lot of this stuff from working on Kubernetes, and they were like, oh yeah, so we use Prowl underneath. And like the discussion I had with them at the time, and I don't know if I should be saying this or not, is that like, if you're in a Jenkins ecosystem, Jenkins X is really good because it helps you to sort of migrate, as it were, because it sort of wraps the Jenkins config and stuff, I think. But he said, given we have no Jenkins, just use Prowl, is what he said to me. But yeah, that if you've seen Jenkins X demos, all that cool like automation stuff is Prowl underneath.
Awesome. All right, we're going to move on to some beginner questions. Trisha, you have a bunch of questions, so we're going to split them up here a little bit, and I'm going to take one out of order first. So the first one she asked is, how do I get started with Kubernetes as a beginner? And some people started responding in a thread here. I think someone gave her an edX link. Just real quick, let's just take a round through each of you, how you would recommend someone to get started with Kubernetes.
If I can bite, I posted the edX link. That was my first first step and kind of just understanding the main concepts. After that, it was getting Minikube, playing around, doing demos, eventually jumping into Kate's the hard way for the real brain scratcher, and just kind of keep building and tinkering. It's really helpful if you have a project or something you want to transition to containers in Kube, just to kind of give you that, carrot at the end of the day. Yeah, and then from there, there's if you really get into it, I like the Linux Foundation, Kubernetes Fundamentals. That was good as well. And I've heard good things about the Linux Academy stuff.
Puya, how'd you get started? Or what do you recommend is the easy way to get started?
I think I got started the hard way. I went into docs, and back then I think docs were really subpar way. And then I went into tutorials online that were all outdated. So it was really tough. But maybe that made me learn better, because then I had to try it myself. I think nowadays it's a lot nicer when we get people joining that don't know Kubernetes very well. I think Kelsey has an online course on, is it Udacity or the other video online learning platform that is for free?
Udacity.
Yes, right, Udacity. There's also something on Udemy, which seems to be not bad. I have not seen the Linux Foundation material. I have some very old material in a GitHub repo that I used to give trainings with. But that was like a long time ago.
Yeah, and I don't want to devolve into CKA prep, but trying to get the official CNCF, getting into the docs or whatever, I think will pay dividends in the future if you're looking to get certified, right? It's like, well, they're going to make you read the docs anyway, so.
Yeah, the docs nowadays are a lot better too. Zach is doing a great job getting everyone together, and
yeah, when I started, I literally grabbed a Linux distro and I'm like, let me install this, and it was absolutely terrible idea to do that. I think so now in hindsight, because I hung around people, they're like, do Kelsey's the hard way thing, and all that did was like confuse me, and it was like terrible. Like, so what I tell people these days is start with the book. Actually, the book that they give at KubeCon, it's the O'Reilly book. And the very first 2 chapters kind of explains the why of Kubernetes. And I think that's important to know as a beginner, so that when you do get to the hard way stuff, you understand why things are that way. And that way you don't end up fighting it. And then I kind of tell people, unless you're going to be an administrator, don't go through the hard way. If you're going to be an administrator, go through the hard way once. Yeah. And then that's never do it again.
CKAD program seems to be more geared towards users nowadays.
Yeah.
So if you don't need to actually set up your own clusters at your company, don't.
Yes.
it's just painful.
Yep.
Yeah, I've actually started with like Udacity course from like Kelsey Hightower, and if you don't know anything, I think it's like just like the best resource, because it sort of approaches you in a like really simple way, and like if you don't know anything, you just sort of understand the basics, and then just if you have any like project, then you can just like use Minikube to start up your Kubernetes and play with it. It's like really easy to do.
Yeah, and Kelsey's chapters in book always explain the why they ended up at that kind of like design, right? Where it's like, I don't understand why I have to do it this way. Why can't I move something? Why do I have to destroy something and recreate it? And it's like, oh, okay. These are kind of the tenets. They kind of tell you the rules that you're playing in, and then a bunch of things start to make sense. So thanks to everybody who is putting the links to all these courses here in the sidebar.
I was just going to mention also Katacoda, because I don't think anyone mentioned it yet, but they've got a really good course on there, and it's kind of cool because it's like interactive. So you get a terminal and they bring up a Kubernetes cluster on their server for you, and then you can like play with it and install stuff and play around. And they've got like 15, 16 really good like getting started if you want to deploy to Kubernetes. And there's like, even on there, there's like a steps to becoming a CCAD, logging, all sorts of stuff. But they're really good.
Yeah. So hopefully that will help get you started. I've heard of a bunch of these. Of course, at VMware, we just helped launch Kubernetes Academy. Check that out. That's like a brand new one. And let's see. Oh, Bobby Tables has his Kate's intro tutorials. Those are really good. What like I think if you're a technical person, something like Kind, or if you're on a Mac doing like Docker with Kubernetes, I help some students doing that. They just right click and they're like, turn on Kubernetes, and then it like does this little thing, and they were able to deploy on their Mac right away. That was kind of useful. So that was really easy for them to just grab tutorials on the net and actually do it on a live cluster on their thing. And we have some follow-up questions on Kind and moving things off of Minikube and into real clusters. So I think we will get there. All right. So that is a ton of resources, Trisha. I hope that gets you started. And we will come back to your other questions here in a minute. Next questions from Imram, validating an admission webhook. Goes, I found 3 ways to deploy our validating admission webhook. Deploy as an HTTPS server. Another is to deploy the webhook server as a Kubernetes aggregated API server. And another is serverless. Saw a repo from Kelsey Hightower on that, and then he's got links to that. Which one is the best way to go about doing this? Advantages or disadvantages over the other?
I think there is another way that is a bit different. At least I'm not sure what the serverless way is. But even like just integrating it, you can now use dynamic validating admission webhooks. So you can just, no matter how you've deployed it, be it as a service inside your Kubernetes server or outside as an HTTPS server that is completely external, or as, I guess, also as a serverless platform, as long as you can have an endpoint and put it in that validation webhook configuration, you can generate, you can run it, use it inside of Kubernetes. As for where to run it, that depends a lot on what you're running, I guess. Like, any other ideas? I mean, if you're running something like Gatekeeper, which is the open policy agent admission webhook implementation, that runs perfectly well inside of Kubernetes. Something else that you develop might be easier to run outside, or if you have something that could act as validating admission webhook, then I wouldn't just change that.
Yeah, I was going to say open. This might be a good case for OPA unless it's something very specific that you're trying to do. So
yes. Plus, we have to mention OPA every single episode of Office Hours. It feels like every problem we have, there's someone has a problem every single show, and OPA solves something for someone. I think we should just put the logo on the thing.
I'm a big fan though too.
Yes.
I think I even handed in a talk about OPA.
Excellent. We should consider doing a special show for OPA.
Yeah, we can get Torin or someone to join.
Yeah. Okay, so let me catch up everyone on chat here. We've got a ton of links there to courses, including Bobby Tables. So Bob and Jeff actually put their courseware into GitHub, and I've actually sat through that course. We've run workshops here locally and stuff, and that one's pretty good. Omicroni wants to say, I think George is correct. I've never done the hard way. And then goes on to say, I wouldn't tell a new Linux user to learn how to compile a kernel and GNU utils to get started, right? Same for Kubernetes. I think that's an excellent point. Imran, I've got your follow-up question there going. Looks like the questions are keeping on coming, so keep them coming here. We are going to move on to Venkat's question. It says, I've been using Kind for my day-to-day learning and development purpose. When I spin up a multi-node cluster, the nodes are named Kind-Worker, Kind-Worker2, Kind-Controller Manager, and so on. Is there a way to customize the node names? Please don't ask me why I would want to do that. I'm just kind of naming my nodes whatever I want, just for consistency. Awesome. So I don't know this one, but I do love using Kind, and it feels like a lot of people are really digging Kind these days. Do we know if there's a way to do this?
Omicronian says there's a -- name flag.
Okay.
I know we're running Kind clusters in testing too, so
yep.
Seems,
so,
yeah.
So cluster -s name foo with the name of the cluster. I think they want the names of the nodes themselves. So let's see. I'm hesitant to fire up anything on my streaming computer. Let's have a look here. He says he has tried that. So let's just give it a second. We might need to follow up on that.
Yeah, keep in mind, kind is very early. I think we just shipped 0.5, which is already a lot of new things. And because it's so early, a lot of things are changing between the versions.
Yep. So
you might want to jump in on their Slack to ask them.
Yep.
Nothing to identify node flags. Maybe because you can identify your setup as a YAML config, you might be able to do it through there. I haven't tried that, so I want to look at that.
And they are on Kubernetes Slack. The channel is #kind, which I whacked there in the chat. If you plop in through there and either ask them in the channel or file an issue, I'm sure someone can help there. Omicromian is saying that the -- name equals is like the prefix for all the things, and just not the cluster name. So let's see what they're chatting about there. So sorry we couldn't help you there, but the kind folks are really kind, haha, and they should be able to help you out. So kind has kind of changed the way I like between kind and microcates. I feel terrible that I wasted all that time learning all that by hand. I remember like grabbing machines and plugging them all together, and that was just...
You're rewriting all our end-to-end tests based on kind right now. And it's worth it. It's actually worth it. It's so much worth it.
Yes. Yeah. All right, moving on. We're all kind and OPA are two jams here. Trisha is asking, how do I prepare charts? I think she's specifically talking about Helm charts here. So normally Mario's our Helm person, but he is not here today. Do we have any tips for her as far as?
I think what I do, I'm not a Helm chart pro, is I take a chart that someone created and kind of change things. Similar to how I create a deployment YAML, I never write it from scratch.
So do you all have like a template repo? Do you have?
No, I just look at some best practices that are like maybe some of the very top or very often updated Helm stable charts. Those might be best practices or show you some best practices. Some best practices that I tend to use is value all the things. So template actually anything that you can template, and including a registry, because if you retag images like we do, for example, or like a lot of companies do, it helps a lot if you've templated the registry separately. That is something that I don't see in a lot of charts, and that's why I fork a lot of charts just for templating the registry. Everything else stays the same.
Sure. And Stormmore has pointed out there's Helm Dash users on Slack, which I knew about, but hash charts, which I didn't know about, just for charts. So that's a really handy tip there.
Yeah. I was also going to say there's a nice guide on the Helm website through their docs. I posted a link there, but
awesome.
It just kind of explains how to actually build the templates, because you can start things off by, I think it's Helm create, and they'll give you a boilerplate.
Oh, sweet. Okay. All right, moving on. So we're about halfway through, everyone. If you're just joining us, this is the Kubernetes office hours. Feel free to join the Slack channel that you see below and post a question. If I've gone over your question, I might have not seen it, feel free to repeat it. Or if you want us to follow up on any of the answers, feel free to type. If you're just joining us, just say hi in the channel, let us know where you're from. Moving on, BB asks, I created a pod with requests and limits being the same, CPU 500M and memory 75 MIB, Megs, looks like. But I see that the total RAM is 15 gigs. How is the calculation done? And I have a follow-up on this one.
So my best guess here is that basically you are looking at the node's RAM, not the pod's RAM, because like it shouldn't add up. If you like kubectl, kubecontrol describe pod and actually look at what it says in the output, you should see that basically limits should be like the amount you specify.
If you want to see actual usage, you might need to install metrics server or something else that acts as the metrics API backend. Because by default, a lot of distributions of Kubernetes might not be running any metrics, so you get only requests and node information. I think.
Right. So
not even sure if node information is included without metrics server.
Yeah. Yeah, the other possibilities could be if you're looking like from inside the pod and you're actually like, I don't know, just looking how much memory that pod, like the shell inside the pod has, like you probably are seeing the nodes memory value, not the pod's limit. So yeah.
Any other ideas here? I have a follow-up question because I was messing around. Part of the reason I started this show is so I can ask questions and not look so dumb. These CPU measurements, what is an M? Like, and are they like consistent? Like if I say 500 M on this CPU limit, but then I move over to an Amazon cluster, is that the same thing?
No, I think M stands for something in the milli of some time measure. Millicores,
yes.
but you share cores always, and the sharing, because you cannot split a core, you basically get half a second per core.
Okay, and Omicronians comes in with 1/1000th of a core. You are right. Okay, good to know. So if you put 1,000 M as your limit, that's one core, and that's consistent across everything.
No, not even that, because the core is always differently defined. I heard recently there is clouds that give you a third core per core that you define. Like, so you actually get like a 300 megahertz core, which is something I ran in the 90s, I guess.
Okay.
I remember like reading Kubernetes docs around resources. So basically one CPU core should be like equal to one AWS virtual CPU, one GCP core, one Azure core, one IBM core, or like one hyper-thread in bare metal on Intel processor. So like they do have some kind of standard measurements, but like I bet it varies on like bare metal stuff you run. So
it feels like it's enough of a difference where I have to care, right?
Even between machines, like we used to even like even the same instance type on AWS might give you different performance.
Sure.
Because there might be a newer, like an 8th generation i9 instead of a 7th generation.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, is a millicore the same on an EPYC CPU versus a Xeon CPU? But of course they are. All right, well, everyone's plopped in a bunch of links. Thank you so much for clearing that up for me. I've been using Kubernetes for like 3 years. I just learned that today. See, we can all learn something today. Keep me away from your production servers. All right, next, moving on. Trisha, how to move away from running and deploying a service from Minikube, which runs locally, to an on-prem cluster. Now, theoretically, I want to say there should be no difference. But fill me in here on some of the actual practical things that you have to do.
One thing you would need to know is like who's running that on-prem cluster and what is it. Like if it's really a very vanilla Kubernetes API that you're getting, you shouldn't have too many problems.
Mm-hmm.
It might be on-prem that you don't have any dynamic load balancers, or you don't have an ingress controller running, which I think Minikube by now comes by standard. And storage, I think persistent storage is now in Minikube enabled as a default, but on-prem you might not have that.
Mm-hmm.
Or it might be a different kind of storage. So that's the kind of hurdles sometimes when you're moving to on-prem clusters. In the cloud, you usually have less of those. It depends a lot who is running it and who has set it up, and how it's set up, like which features are enabled. Do you actually have access to the API?
Yeah, and like in a decent Kubernetes cluster, like if it has configured like ingress controllers and things like that, it should be just like take the manifests, kubectl apply on the new cluster, and it should be good to go. Another thing is like you should, if your thing is actually an HTTP server or something like that, maybe you want to introduce some kind of network policies and basically limit access to your deployment. If you need to, definitely double check that you apply or change your ingress names and things like that in your pod if you use like different URL. So yeah.
Awesome.
What I used to do is if I try something on Minikube and then I try it in another Kubernetes, I would file a bug report if it doesn't run. I used to do that for our own product. Engineers would hate me. But now we have a very vanilla API, I guess.
And the other thing you'd want to watch out for is you might have security policies in place. And so where on Minikube you could run, all your containers as
Whatever you
root.
want.
That
Yeah.
may not be the case in your prod cluster, and that's kind of best practice. Don't run as root. Don't give access to the host network, host volume, set resource limits, those kinds of things, so you don't kind of box yourself in. So that would be a big one to look at.
Yes, definitely a good point. You don't want to get R-backed when not expecting it. All right. Any other tips? Any tips here from the audience? Let me look here about is moving from local development to a cluster. Let's see. Thanks everyone for the information on millicores. Trisha's question. That's the one we're talking about now. Amakroni wants to say, I think it expressed related to CPU time, so the CPU speed affects the actual impact of that setting. Good to know. Stonemore says a core is a core. It doesn't mean that performance won't be better. Awesome. All right, so keep the questions coming while we move on. Venkat says, I would like to try different GUI tools to manage the Kubernetes cluster. I've tried the official dashboard UI, Rancher, Weave Scope. Is there any place that lists all dashboard management projects for Kubernetes, or do you have any more suggestions? I just want to try different solutions for learning purposes. Do we got any links for them?
Awesome Kubernetes repo on GitHub, maybe.
It has a list of like
Henning from Zalando again, he was building up a list of Kubernetes dashboards and UI tools. There's also a really nice new one from the VMware team. What's it called again? Something with
It is Octant. Yeah,
Octant,
Brian's working on.
Yeah.
I just posted a link to Henning's tweet.
Yeah.
By the way.
Henning's tweet literally lists them all, it looks like. So hold on, let's look.
Yeah.
Let's go through
and I think he made he did a blog post from that tweet, kind of.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure, but I can't find it anywhere.
Yeah.
Yep.
Tweets are easier to find with Henning.
Yeah. So we've got Octants. There is Weaveworks Scopes, which has been around a while. The Linkerd dashboard. Containership/Constellate. Never heard of that one. I'm going to check that one out. Rancher, of course. The Kubernetes, alternative Kubernetes UI. That's a cool one. Man, there's a bunch of these. This guy Mustafa says he's working on one. Everyone's working on one.
Bitnami had this mobile app.
Yeah.
I was using that. It was fun just for like showing off things. Like, hey, it's someone.
It's like you're a QCon, you're like, check me out. Yeah. Sweet.
So
and there's a bot post.
Posted a link.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. I'm gonna open this up. Wow, I had no idea there were so many.
Yeah, it seems like there's a new one every day.
Yeah, he went and grabbed screenshots of all of them and did a little mini review of all of them.
Yeah, because he built one for his users, and that's why he was looking at like what's the other ones out there.
That is kick ass. Is there anything Henning doesn't do?
Right? We should just invite him here.
Yes. So that will help you out. Another link I plopped in there is awesome-Kubernetes. That's probably that's not a bad getting started one as well, because that's a curated list of awesome links across the web of Kubernetes stuff. It's like the kind of thing that you want handy for all the people on your team kind of thing, and you could just make your way through it. So that's really handy to have. All right, anything else on dashboards? All right, Trisha was mentioning Scaffold before, and Scaffold YAML. I just learned it makes the container will be the same while deploy build code, and Helm helps us to maintain the rollback in deploy. So hold on, is there a question in here somewhere? Let me look. Any of y'all using Scaffold or any of those similar tools?
It's on my list, but I haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah, I feel like there were a bunch of these, and then.
So Ilya did a really nice blog post on it. I'll go track it down.
That will be awesome.
That sounds good.
All right. I'm confused if there's a question there. Trisha, if you hear me, you could re-ask or maybe be more specific. We can come back to that. Imran asks, can you share resources checklists for really hardened production grade clusters?
I think currently, at least for the Kubernetes part, you should definitely check out the CIS benchmark.
Okay.
There's a bunch of community people and also a lot of other security people working on it. I think our current version out there is for 1.13, but it still applies.
Yeah.
And we try to get one out, I think, every 6 months.
Oh, looks like Chris.
And KubeBench, exactly. KubeBench is an implementation of that benchmark that is a bit easier to run. There is also a Sonoboy plugin that is running, I think, KubeBench inside.
Yes,
Sonoboy.
it does.
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, there is also like conformance tests. You want to make sure that your cluster is like conformant to Kubernetes. So yeah. So basically, I think Sonoboy is also running the same test.
Yeah, and then it will run the CIS thing afterwards, or optionally, I think.
Yeah, definitely conformance before security, because if you're not conform, definitely take care of that first.
One thing I want to point out as well is the work that SIG Cluster Lifecycle has been doing to make the clusters kind of more secure by default when you're using kubeadmin, right? Like when they turned on RBAC by default, it's like, well, we're not going to let you kind of accidentally set up a cluster without RBAC. So they've been slowly over years or whatever to kind of tightening it up to make it more secure out of the box. And of course, if you're using a hosted Kubernetes platform, then you should definitely check out whatever features. A lot of them have like a features page of all the things that they do to make your thing production grade ready. Any more comments on this one? BBS, how do you guys keep track of so much stuff? We actually use a great tool called hackmd.io. It's my favorite thing ever. It's like Google Docs, but with Markdown, and you can connect it to GitHub. And I just found out there's a new feature. We can actually keep all our notes in GitHub and like push and pull and stuff. So I'm going to be investigating that right after the show. All right, so Trisha's follow-up question is, how do I write a scaffold.yaml? This one I'm not sure of.
I think you just like copy paste it from existing projects. At least this is what I do. Like
modern day Kubernetes. Yes. Is anybody?
I think we have like I've used it, and I think we have an example where you just like sort of start up scaffold, and it starts watching the code and actually deploys the manifests which are in the same folder.
Yeah.
So yeah, just try the demo. I think it's like pretty straightforward to figure it out. So.
So let's see. She goes on to say, I've gone through the Helm course at Plural site halfway, and then she puts a link. But the course explains about the command, but not how to create charts. So I asked the same for scaffold, YAML, and Helm charts. Are those Helm and charts different? As I am completely new and trying to learn something. Okay, so first things first, we need to determine what's a Helm chart and what's a scaffold thing and what's a Helm thing.
Scaffold is more of a build tool, so it helps you kind of
right.
make sure your builds are the same across all your environments, which is really cool. And I think it can output Helm chart, kind of like draft.
Okay.
But I haven't played around with it too much. I think Ilya gets into it, how to use it with the article I posted.
Yep.
And I also gave her the docs tutorial from Scaffold to hopefully help.
Yeah. Anybody else on using the tool? Unfortunately, this doesn't seem to be our area of expertise. But if Ilya was here, I'm sure he would. So sorry about that. If anyone on the channel has any more information to help her out, probably wouldn't hurt to, I'm just thinking in my head, to go back and maybe ask Joe or someone on TGIK to go take a look at Scaffold and Draft and all of these kind of like ancillary tools that we probably haven't checked out in a while. So sorry about that. We'll keep the channel open though. So if anybody has any tips for Trisha, please let us know.
George?
Yes.
TGIK already did a Scaffold. So
yeah, but it was like over a year ago, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So lesson I've been learning is when you look at a tool, you'll have to come back in a year because it's totally changed and different. So it might be time for us to check that out again. Moving on, Venkat asks, I would like to provision a Kubernetes cluster with separate etcd cluster that's already set up and running. Can someone point me to any documentation article on getting started, please? Thanks. And then Joel said you replied to him in a thread, but I do have a follow-up question because I've heard this asked before. When you say already a standing separate etcd cluster, we definitely don't want to share.
You definitely don't want to share etcd clusters between Kubernetes clusters because
Let's get this all out of the way first.
Yes. But if you have some multi-tenancy tooling on top of something, yes, but don't do like a cluster, an etcd cluster between.
Yeah.
And then usually you would most probably have your etcd somehow TLS encrypted, so there is certificates for accessing it. So you would have to bring those to the servers or to kubeadm.
Yep, and Venkat says, or a new separate etcd cluster. Chromian recommends, don't share etcd with anything else, which is what I was going to say. Yeah. I've been told, like, do not keep it.
Yeah.
Because I've heard people, they're like, well, we've been running an etcd thing internally at work for other things. Can't we just like connect? Like, don't do that. So that's good.
So they just for the context there, if you haven't seen the thread, Venkat is standing up his clusters using kubeadm. So he can pass in a configuration file there, which then allows him to set where his external etcd endpoints are and the credentials to connect to it. So that's just part of the kubeadm init phase.
Awesome.
Yeah, but make sure it's like super secure etcd with like encryption, because like it stores your secrets in like plain text, like it stores your secrets. So meaning if somebody hacks into your etcd cluster, you're gonna like lose all your secret data.
Has encryption at rest not been done yet? I thought that was.
Yeah, it works. I think it's in. Did we move it to beta already? I don't remember. It's alpha or beta. It works definitely, but you have to set it up, and so it's not always set up depending on the setup.
Yeah, but it's encryption and disk, right? It's like if you still query etcd, it's still gonna give you raw values back.
True.
Cool.
All right. Anything else on etcd? Keep the stream separate, I think, is the tip there for everyone.
And really know how to run etcd clusters if you're running them yourself.
Yes.
Train to scale them up and down. Train what happens if one of the nodes goes down if you're running a multi-node cluster.
Yep.
It's definitely something that you don't want to learn on the ropes while production goes down.
Yes, and I think everyone, hopefully by now, is fully migrated to etcd 3. And if you have not done so already, definitely investigate that. So people are still going to talk about encryption, it looks like. Trisha has a great question I want to follow up on, but let's get Guadam's out of the way. In a situation, if we have multiple pods belonging to one user and a consumer-facing product, so basically thousands of users and each have 3 to 4 pods running, how do you make sure things are isolated for each user and maintainable? Right now, if we are thinking of having unique namespace for each user, is that the right way to go? The multi-tenancy question. Go.
It's a good first step. It's no isolation by default. The namespaces don't isolate anything. They give you the primitive of being able to use, for example, network policies and quota and different things to isolate. That said, you will still have just a certain level of isolation. It depends a lot on what you need. If you really want to separate per machine, you might even put the namespace with node selectors on certain machines. Or you might even at some point run separate, I don't know, virtual or actual kubelets for different.
Yep, and Chromian points out namespace is a good way for a soft multi-tenancy, whatever that really means. So we're getting into we got to be careful here, right? Because a lot of people say, well, isolated, and then they think, oh, like, all right, this thing is running and this thing is running. But like in this context with multi-tenancy, we mean, can my credit card data get to your thing? Like kind of like real separation, like in a separate machine or what a VM gives you. So we have to be really careful here, especially when we're talking about different like container runtimes, and some claim to be more secure than others and whatnot. So just a little heads up there on that one. But I see lots of people typing. So I've seen this question asked of a lot of like senior developers like Tim Hawking and stuff, and it feels like a lot of it depends on what you are looking for when you say multi-tenant, right? Like, are you looking for that soft multi-tenant as he mentioned, or are you looking for like a real no, there needs to be a really hard line separation between this workload and this other workload. So yeah, he mentions like credit card level isolation. Is that even possible? Yeah, Norman Kerning points out gvisor is a good runtime to use your multi-tenancy too. I know that the Kata containers also has features in that space. And it feels like there's a lot of work going into this area because it's not as awesome as it could be as far as it comes to container separation and isolation, like real isolation.
Yeah, if you need PCI compliance, you might not get that with.
Yeah, and Stoneware points out separate clusters.
Yeah.
That you're just there's no room for errors when you're on separate clusters. I see lots of people typing though, so let's see what the community has to say on that one. But hopefully that related, Ravjo, I hope I pronounced that right, and can you recommend resources for getting started on multi-tenancy and multi-cluster management? So especially multi-cluster management, I feel like is the next frontier now that kubeadmins kind of solved the set up one cluster thing. I don't think we've gotten to the point yet where you're kind of making disposable clusters like people often talk about. So do we have any tips here as far as getting started on multi-cluster management and multi-tenancy and stuff?
I think multi-cluster management is just not there right now as an overall tool. It might just depend on your vendor. Like each vendor has their own multi-cluster management, and some of them are able to kind of adopt clusters that were not created by the vendor. Some of them are not, but there is not like this UI that would just help you adopt all kinds of clusters and then run things against it. At least I don't know of any that would do it right now.
Yep.
I haven't looked at Octant right now.
I've had great success running multiple clusters with the Rancher UI. Quite interested to see where the VMware project, the new stuff that was announced yesterday at VMware World is going to go in terms of their multi-cluster management solution. But yeah, I've had a lot of fun with Rancher.
Yep, and I'm a Chromie and Stormer say Rancher can adopt all sorts of clusters, so that might be an interesting thing to look at. I see other people typing. Let's see what opinions other people have. Trisha asks since y'all are Kubernetes experts, if you run performance tests and application code in the same cluster, how does that impact from the infrastructure point of view? I'm assuming a bunch of you, when you set up your cluster, you test and kind of benchmark first before putting workloads on it. Any
yeah, I think
recommendations?
I'm trying to assume that what is meant is running a performance test while like productive workloads are running.
Yep.
And yes, it does impact. Usually it does. I mean, you test because you've not tested before usually, and the test might lead to surprises. Also, don't just do performance and load tests, but also do kind of failover tests where you selectively turn off stuff and see if you can handle failures. But do them before you go live, before you go to production. I don't know there is some ways of doing, and some people just test in production, but it is more risky than doing it separately.
Okay, we got about 5 minutes left, and then I want to do the raffle, so we're going to try to power through these last questions here. Venkat asks, sorry about the dog, everyone. I learned about kubectl plugins to extend the functionality and also the crew plugin to easily install additional plugins. What sort of use cases are there for using kubectl plugins? What sort of custom things can you do with kubectl plugins? Thanks.
I think the best one I've seen, and I was looking at it this morning, is something like a kubectl sudo command, which helps you in most cases run without, for example, admin credentials in RBAC, but then sudo your way into things that are that need elevated privileges. Other examples. I don't really remember anything that I'm using currently, but there is a lot out there. I think Crew already lists quite a lot. Anyone else using kubectl plugins right now?
I'm not.
The only one I've used is the Nginx Ingress one, which is kind of cool. Helps with debugging. That's kind of where I imagine a lot of this will go. Yeah, it's used for validating what it thinks the state of the world is. So you want to see what endpoints it thinks it's going to route to, for instance. But that's kind of where I see it going. It's lots of like extensions to Kubernetes will start building these. So things like Cert Manager might make themselves a CLI for like doing some extra stuff or things like that. CRDs maybe will have some extra functionality for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I can also imagine things that extend Kubernetes would have their CLI as a kubectl plugin if they don't work with native kind of bare kubectl directly.
Looks like people are tossing in their favorite plugins in chat as well. Rackess, RAKKESS. I've never heard of this one before, but that's always good to know. I always learn something in this show. I love it. All right, we are running out of time, so we've got 2 more. BB says, I have a 4-node cluster and 1 node got rebooted. Pods not rescheduled to other nodes. Pods got rescheduled to other nodes. Now that the node that was rebooted is up again, but it doesn't have any pods, it's empty. How do I rebalance them? Is there like a...
There's a descheduler thing, I think. Isn't it also from Henning? At least I know Zalando is using it. Yeah.
So I'm going to assume this is a thing that just deschedules things on certain nodes and kind of re-evens them out.
Yeah, and you can actually run it as like one-time job or a cron job. It's just like a thing that just balances out everything.
So out of curiosity, in a production cluster or whatever that's actually live and doing a bunch of this stuff, do any of you worry in real time about how many pods are in each node, or do you just let the scheduler kind of do its thing? Because I kind of see where they're coming from, right? It's like, well, I have a node and it's empty. I kind of want, I want to use the cluster for the cluster, right? Keep it all even, and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on...
Yeah. After you. So we've got some sort of spot instance stuff going on with our clusters. So we have like most of our workload on spot instances and then some on demand.
Sure.
So we actually have something that pushes stuff off of the on-demand nodes. The idea is that they'll always be empty in case any of the spot nodes start getting terminated, so that we've got like basically empty nodes ready.
Sure.
The idea here being that if ever all of the spot instances were to go away, the cluster autoscaler will bring up more on-demand nodes, and then eventually when the spot instances come back into the cluster, everything would start scheduling back from the on-demand to the spot instances, and then the on-demand nodes would be scheduled down again. So we'd go back to using our like cheaper compute.
Right. So do you all sit there? Well, if you can't tell me, that's fine. But do you sit there and figure out, okay, we're really cheap today? Kind of trying to figure out how to push as much stuff to spot. That's what I would be doing.
I mean, so we've been running spot instances on our production clusters for 2 years or so now, and touch wood, we have never had an instance taken away from us because the spot price has gone like above our bid. So I have tested this manually by deliberately setting our bid basically to what the price is, and it does just sort of like shift over onto on demand and then auto scale back onto the spot instances, and it works. But as I say, it's never actually happened in production because we bought the way we figured out what we decided the best way to bid for spot instances was just to bid the on demand price.
Yeah,
because it basically never gets there, which means you're always paying less for the compute than you would be paying otherwise. And if it ever gets to that price, then you just start paying the on-demand price. So
right. So you're actually living the dream. And then Stormborn says, I use cluster autoscaler, and that node just goes away since it has nothing on it, which is also nice. Okay, last question goes to Alan. What do you guys recommend for packaging and deploying applications to Kubernetes? Right now I have a CD/CI pipeline in GitLab where I use kubectl for that. Should I change it and look at other options? This is an open-ended question. But let's just see what each of you and the channel has to say. Well, I will work on the raffle.
Yeah, so I can go first. We're using GitLab for packaging and building our containers, and then we're using FluxCD to do the deployment aspect, which has been quite successful so far.
Anybody else? Anybody in the channel?
Yeah, we've been using Circle CI and just basically having this application which continuously pulls our manifest repository and just applies everything which it finds in there. So yeah, it works pretty well.
Venkat says Jenkins Kubernetes CD plugin for auto deployment. Anybody else? And I've got the winners for the raffle. All right. We're going a little bit over on time. We appreciate everyone listening up. Appreciate all the help from the panel. It always makes this a lot more fun when we have your expertise there. Stormore, Venkat, Omicron. We always appreciate any information that you can share among the community. That always makes the show a lot more fun and easier and more diverse as well, too, right? Because it makes it easier for us to find out what's out there and help each other out. So we hope you have enjoyed this. We will be scheduling the next one here probably a few hours after this. We always go on the third Wednesday of every month, except for today. And the winners of the raffle are our Venkat and BB. You've won a Kubernetes t-shirt. I will PM you after the show and give you a little code for the CNCF store so you can wear the cool Kubernetes t-shirt that we all forget to wear on the actual day to show you what it looks like, but it's pretty dope. And with that, any last final word for everybody? Any final words there, audience? Typing, ooh, Argo CD, that's a good one. Pretty cool. We had 161 people join us today, so thank you very much, everybody. All right, and with that, we're going to close it out. Panel, everyone wave, say goodbye. Thanks, everybody. We'll see everybody third Wednesday of every month right here on YouTube. And keep on Kubernetes-ing, keep on clustering. I don't know, whatever. Keep on copying and pasting from Stack Overflow. How about that? We'll leave it at that. All right, cheers, everyone.